Osiris.
Welcome to the Saint Disruption Podcast, where brilliant musicians, poets, and visionaries come together to share their creative collaborations and explore what it means to be human in these times.
So welcome to this episode of the Saint Disruption Podcast. John and I are delighted today to have with us Hala Liza Ghafouri and Shahzad Ismaili. It's really wonderful to have both of you with us. And at the end of our discussion today, we'll make sure that we provide links to your social media and to ways that people can learn more about your work, because you're doing really creative, really incredible work in the world. And we really want people to be inspired and learn more about what you all do after this podcast is done.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. It's really exciting for me because I love both of you guys, and I know you for a long time, through the music world and through Hala, through all kinds of things. And I'm a huge admirer of both of your art and you as people. And one of the surprising things to me is when we talked, Jeff and I were talking, I said, we really got to get Hala to do a poem, one of her own poems, because right now you're in the midst of this incredible translation, promoting and sharing this incredible Rumi translation with the world. But I know from knowing, I first got turned on to your connection with words from your poems, and it's so beautiful. So I really, when I wanted to, it's like we have to get Hala in here for one of these. I thought maybe we do something together, but then I thought Shahzad would be like the perfect guy for this. And it turns out that you guys are already working together, which was kind of also really beautiful. So thank you guys for doing this.
So how did you two meet? What project brought you together?
Okay, I'm going to take that one on. So, so this is just a beautiful thing for me to think about, to ruminate on anytime I want to, which is longevity in friendships is just so wild. I grew up moving a lot when I was a kid, every couple of years. So I'm not that person that had the same friends since kindergarten or that kind of thing. I never really had long friendships until I got older. And I moved to New York around 2000 and then was right away looking for who I might learn from and play with and play music with. And really right around those early years, I met Hala. And at that time, Hala was more oriented towards writing songs, being a songwriter, being a lead singer, guitar player, songwriter in a band situation. And I was typically like the second guitarist or another player in the band. And so I always bring this up with Hala. I still remember playing SOBs in like the early 2000s. And something about that means a lot to me because New York has these periods for all of us. And many times they're connected to a place or a club as well. Like someone will say something about Wetlands or the Cooler in the 90s, and it has such a flavor and such a set of memories for all of us. So for me, SOB is the corner of Houston and Varick, I think it is. Early 2000s, that's when it begins. That's when I first met Hala, around those times. And then we've stayed friends throughout so many of life's movements. When it's time like that, it's like relationships, friendships, changes in who we are and who we think we are and what we're doing with our life and all this,
Had you recorded before?
We've recorded a little bit. I mean, strangely, we haven't recorded all that much together, just a bit. But I'll say also the first time we met was at, speaking of places, and this place doesn't exist anymore, but Galapagos in Williamsburg. And
yeah.
Shahzad was playing with Burnt Sugar, which Greg Tate was conducting. And
Right.
And I was like, so into it. And then Shahzad came up to me, he's like, you were really into that. I said, I was. So that's how we started chatting. Anyway.
So we are very delighted today to share with you the premiere of Hala and Shahzad's collaborative work, Latif.
Some words are like suitcases, so packed with meaning, backstory, connotations, they burst open when crossing the border between one language and another. Insights tumble out, and sometimes we discover that a state of being we haven't named has been named by another. The immigrant word, sometimes a revelation, an invitation. Take the word Latif. 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 It means silky, delicate, soft, hair thin, sheer as gossamer. It means gentle, kind, open-hearted, receptive, and tender. Latif. Saffron threads jutting out of the purple-petaled crocus. Latif. A silky breeze on a summer night. Latif. A mother caressing the forehead of her newborn. Latif. A sincere apology and the sincere forgiveness that follows. Latif. Picture this. Water lapping the shore of the Tigris River on a moonlit night millennia ago. A woman sheds her clothes, steps into the water. Silvery fronds of date palms sway in the breeze. She lies back, floating in the moonlit river, at ease, translucent to the light of being, permeable to the sensual mystery of being everything here. Latif. Latif. What does it mean to become Latif? Asks a true dervish. Say a dervish in Damascus, a dervish in Konya, a dervish in Nashapur, whirling in their 360-degree embrace of creation dance with one hand open to the sky and one to the earth, chanting, Ya Latif, Ya Latif. That word, one of the 99 names of God, they say, calling out, Ya Latif, Ya Latif. Chanting this word, they bring to mind not just the meaning, not just the gentle, delicate, kind, silky attribute of the divine, but the process of becoming it, becoming Latif in daily life. To be Latif is to shed our ego's defensive armor, is to drop the insistence on me versus you versus you versus me versus you versus me versus you, is to dismantle the walls that separate us, is to soften, to open, to allow for an intimate exchange that makes life worth living for many of us. شعر گشتم در لطافت, said the Persian mystic and sage Jalaluddin Muhammad ibn Hussein Balkhi, aka Mulana, aka Mevlana, aka Rumi. Shar gashtam. I became hair thin, he said. What of me became hair thin? My defenses, my armor thinned, my armor thinned to a silken scrim. I sifted the soil that gives vision to the blind. In another poem, he says, they say there's a door between one heart and another. How can there be a door where no wall remains? That place where no wall remains is Latif. He says, چون خار دیدم سوی گل بگریختم خویش را چون سکه دیدم در شکم آمیختم کاسه پر زهر بودم دیده پر درد بودم سوی تریاق آمدم دست در عیسی زدم. He says, I saw myself sharp as a thorn. I fled to the softness of petals. I saw myself sour as vinegar. I mixed myself with sugar. An aching eye, seeing through pain, a stewing pot of poison. I was both, reaching for the antidote. I touched compassion. I touched mercy. He literally says, I touched Jesus. But let's put aside 750 years of baggage, misunderstanding, and war attached to this name and get to the point of what Jesus embodied: compassion, mercy, reaching for the antidote. I touched compassion. I touched mercy. In the dirt on the path of love, I found the medicine that ensouls sight. My armor thinned to a silken scrim. I sifted the soil that gives vision to the blind. I sifted the soil that gives vision to the blind. Latif, Latif, Latif. Consider the trees. Where is the site of exchange that keeps the trees alive? We see their thick, hard trunks surging skyward. But where is the site of exchange that enables them to grow? Not in the woody, hard, impenetrable trunk, but in the most delicate places. The tiny root hairs, the tiny pores on the underside of the leaves. Latif, Latif, what strength these vulnerable places enable. And I know it's hard, being two-legged mammals walking the earth with no fur, needing cover, needing shelter, needing so much. And I know hurt people are hurting people at every level of society, wreaking havoc with no remorse. So it is hard to be soft, hard to walk the world, Latif. We persist. Let us persist. Open to this mystery. What can we do? What can we do but honor, value, protect,
this life-giving, precious state of being as we can, and see what happens.
This work is such medicine for these times. When people are scared about an uncertain future, the tendency is to stiffen up and to root yourself into what you believe in and what is certain, and what will make you feel safe. And Latif is really the antidote. And I'm so deeply appreciative that you all have offered this medicine. So I've got a question for you, Hala, and that is, do you recall your first encounter with the concept of Latif?
The first time I heard the word latif was when I was a child. It's a common word in Persian. So someone might say that the fabric is latif. It's silky. It's delicate, or someone's voice could be latif. But in terms of experiencing the word this way, that didn't happen until I started to read Rumi's poetry and also study Sufi mysticism. And in Sufi mysticism, one of the central aspects of the Sufi path is to move from one aspect of self to another. So the nafs ammara to nafs mutmainna. And in that transition from this kind of egoic aspect of self that might be very defensive and have the armor up and the walls up and might be prone to greed, for instance, that actually has a name, that aspect of self. And the idea is that actually can be transformed. I mean, that's part of the belief system, that transformation is possible, and that armor thins down and the walls thin down. And so that kind of latif, that becoming latif, becoming then also permeable to the present moment, having the ability to really be present and really exchange in this way that is vulnerable, is tender. This is all latif. It's considered a kind of evolved state of being. And of course, none of us are perfect, and it's not an end-all thing, and we move along this spectrum from these different aspects of self, or this extreme version of this extreme version, but to sort of be aware of it and to choose it at different moments is the idea, and hopefully choose it more and more. Rumi's poetry, he has a piece where he says, "My armor thinned to a silken scrim," which actually I mentioned in the piece. I mentioned that, but that was the first place that I really engaged with the word. And then there's this wonderful book, Physicians of the Heart, where these Sufi thinkers and practitioners wrote about the 99 names of God, as this is one of them, as I mentioned in the piece, and talked about that word.
When did you write the poem?
When did I write that? I mean, in a way, I had written it a few years ago, but not really. I don't think I really finished it till you asked me to. So, because I thought I was going to come on here and recite Rumi, and then you said, no, something original. So I thought, you know what, this is interesting. I should finish this piece. So it was kind of a catalyst. This was a catalyst for me to finish it.
It's so great when you do bring to the table an immigrant word, as you say, that really does not have an equivalent in the English language in this case. It encompasses so much. I think your choice is so timely because the medicine of Latif, the practice of becoming Latif, is really the antidote to so much of what we're seeing in this accelerated time of transformation on our planet. A lot of people are understandably feeling helpless, feeling scared, and a lot of people are hurting people. All these patterns are playing out in such a accentuated and potentized manner. It's reminders like the creation of beauty that you two just did for us that show us the way forward. Shahzad, was Latif part of your vernacular before this collaboration?
No, not at all. I'm really appreciative to be learning things whenever I work with Hala. It hits me really hard when she starts speaking at a show. Let's say we play a show together, and in between a piece of music or during a piece of music, she might begin explaining or expounding or relating to some of the text. And in that instant, I absolutely become a listener, and a listener that's looking for instruction and looking for growth. And so on the evening that we did this, I was new to it totally.
Did you perform it? Did you do it together live, or did you add the music after?
We did it live, and you know certainly as well as I do, John, and Hala and maybe Jeff as well, just how heavy that is, the instantaneousness of hearing something for the first time and then responding or reacting or saying what you want to it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you able to articulate what that process is for you? I mean, I personally know it's very hard because it's music and it's feeling and you're reacting. But, and I know just from seeing you so many times in every situation, how amazing your contribution is to any format, and kind of like how perfect what you choose to play is. It's difficult to define what it is that makes that happen. And I know it's like listening and feeling, but are you able to articulate that at all?
So let's say Hala's sitting on the couch and she's saying kindness is the way forward. Like, let's say she says those words. Now, what's interesting is, depending on how she says it, I might feel a certain context around it. Let's say she says it a little bit loudly. Then let's say what I suddenly experience within myself is the context of intensity or even anger, righteous anger. And so in that moment, the context I give the phrase is, we must look for this kindness, otherwise more destruction is coming. And then because I might feel that context in that moment, then suddenly I make a choice about volume or about graininess of the sound, or even if I'm literate enough in that moment, what actual color or chord I might play. And then when I make that choice, Hala is listening and may then continue further to open up that contextual choice of that momentary reading. On the other hand, it could be quite the opposite. She might whisper, kindness is the way forward. And then my context might be me being a child, like looking down at my own feet in my bedroom and saying, this loneliness will peel itself back if more kindness is here now. And then I may choose to play very quietly and very softly, and maybe then Hala might listen and go further in that direction. So that's actually at least a little bit towards explaining how that can be, how that can work back and forth.
It's better than a little bit. It's kind of a masterclass in how to accompany someone. Thank you, Shazad. It's beautiful.
Well, it's kind of also about what John and I have been exploring for a while, and what you triumphed in, and that is blurring the lines between a musical exposition and a flowering, a blossoming, an unfolding of the sacred. What you just explained, Shazad, is so much about Latif, isn't it? It's about receptivity and opening yourself, and about trust and that deep listening. When we put ourselves in that space of trust, medicine comes through, and it has healing potential, transformative potential. As I listened to Latif again this morning, one question really came to my mind again and again, and that is it reasonable to assume that to practice and engage in becoming Latif, that it is upon the foundation of trust? And what do the Sufi traditions say about that? And I'd like to hear from both of you. Where has trust come to play in terms of your life as a creative artist?
as a creative artist, trust comes through presence. I mean, my mind can go in lots of directions. So if I am present, listening, breathing, I can trust myself more in that state of mind. If I'm allowing my mind to, go in different directions and be distracted, that's sort of that doesn't really help me with the creative process. So I think for me, trust increases the deeper the presence, the deeper the trust of the moment, really. Because when we're collaborating, we're trusting a moment. If I can be deeply present in that moment, I'm more apt to trust that something will unfold that I'll like. So then what are we trusting? Everything's unknown. There's a big question mark every day. But what did the Sufis say? What does Rumi say? Rumi, there is this unfathomable source. There is this great other spirit, shoreless, boundless sea of love and compassion that we can tap into. That is, one could say, within us if we uncover it. One could say it's without us. It's a divine force. But he insists that the divine is within us. The trust is in this whole unfolding. Now, some people will say, "What the hell are you talking about?" It's like there's all these horrible things happening in the world. What kind of God is this? And I would say it's a good question, and there's a lot of injustice. And one might say, what kind of God is doing this? What am I trusting when there's so much injustice and there's so much pain? And yet at the same time, for me as an individual, like I certainly enjoy trusting in something greater, sort of trusting in God force. I don't like to use the word God because it's so loaded with baggage. As I say in the piece, it's so loaded. And so it's hard to use it. But a shoreless, boundless sea of love and compassion, I trust that. And I do. I trust that I can access that.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to talk about the creator. Of course, I believe in the creator, but it's like very personal what I believe. The spiritual experience is personal. And it sounds weird to talk about it.
I think it's great for us all to talk about it, no?
I don't know.
And then change our minds a week later.
I mean, in one of the poems, that I'm working on for the upcoming volume, he says, that sea, the image of that sea restores the light in our eyes. Now, first, to say this, the image of that sea, because that sea is unfathomable. So your experience of the divine is based partly on your imagination, and it should be, because it's unfathomable. So how can we relate to it unless we're using our own imagination and allowing ourselves to really feel a connection with this? So that sea, the image of that sea restores the light in our eyes. Its waters run down the roof through the spout, our faces, the blooming flowers. Dates fed on those waters feed the unborn Savior inside the Holy Mother inside of you. Well,
Yeah.
What else can I say about trust? I'll give an example. The stars spin, the seasons change, the earth submits to it all, right? The earth essentially submitting to the heavens, to the sky. And he says, submit to your soul in the way that the earth submits to the sky. Submit to your soul. Surrender to this kind of other force that is unnameable, unfathomable, but it's kind of like a reservoir of, one could say, compassion and love. And that I believe. I mean, when I was a child, I would picture the God force as this reservoir suspended in space, of positivity and love. And I would go with my little ladle and drink from it, so however one conceives of it. I mean, he says that sea, the image of that sea, because it is an imaginative process, the spiritual experience. So he says the image of that sea restores the light in our eyes, and he invites us to trust in that. And he says, at sea, in that ocean, the frantic watchman, shaking his rattle and banging his stick, falls quiet. So we can put our trust in something. Why not? I mean, we are creating our reality. If we allow ourselves to relax, to let go of the paranoid watchman shaking his rattle and banging his stick, and if we call upon something that maybe feels larger than ourselves, and that we know that we also carry it within us, that helps the being, that helps the psyche relax and be its best self.
I love the sense of the be still and know that I am. I mean, that is always such an important piece. Shahzad, there's a unwavering image of a benevolent universe, a ever flowing fountain of love and compassion. Is that underpinning your experience as a creator?
That's a really like beautifully huge sentence. Here's what I can bring to that. For me, the word trust is profoundly like painful and complicated because, well, there are a lot of becauses to that. So the first one that comes to mind is that I think through the 51 years I've been alive, that trust connects to consistency, and I'm not consistent. So I feel like I walk the world earning and losing and breaking and earning and losing trust constantly with those around me. And that's very painful for me because I don't imagine myself to be someone to be afraid of or concerned to interact with. And yet, because trust connects to consistency for a lot of people, I'm a complicated person for people. That's a painful reality to live with and to walk within for me. But I'm trying to make peace with it. I'm trying to gently change myself if I can. Another thing that relates to this question for me is that when I was young, there was a lot of teasing with others, with other kids towards me. So I think there's an interior self that's very far from others. And almost in a kind of gleeful way, I hold it very far from others. Like it would be almost impossible for any person to cross over to it. And in a way, there's almost like a kind of sarcastic glee of keeping that part of myself unreachable. I think there's a part of me that in a very, very deep way doesn't trust anybody. Like that very, very inner self. And I wonder, and then unfortunately, because trust borders on love, I may not have ever loved anyone or let anyone love me actually, because that part is like very, very much in the interior. Okay, the third thing I can think of that relates to this question is my daughter seems to be doing great. And I think that's because somehow I and her mom have telegraphed to her that you can trust the world. And so she is so open and so relaxed in life. And another component of that relates to the first thing I was talking about with consistency is shortly after she was born, I promised myself that she would be the one person that, if at all possible, I would always do what I said I was going to do. And I've been pretty high up there with that, like some kind of 90th percentile zone. And so I think that also contributes to how we are with each other and how she feels in the world.
That's so incredibly courageous, Shahzad. Thank you for that sharing. I mean, it really leads me to respect you even more than I did before we met today.
Hey, Shahzad, can I ask a question? I personally understand a lot of what you're saying, and can relate. What happens to all that when you play music?
Yeah, that's the amazing thing is that when people say like music saved my life and that kind of thing, I think there is an aspect of that for me because that's the one zone where all the doors are open. And so in other parts of my life, it can show me how to get there. So like if I feel relaxed or true to myself or open and awake and vibrant in that moment, then I can keep looking for that door the rest of the day.
Because to me, like, the process that you so eloquently described about how you created the backdrop or the accompaniment or the music for this poem, as also a improvising musician, I won't go into my own personal struggles, but like in that moment when you make that decision and the way you describe it, you are trusting something. There's something being trusted there that is essential. For all music, but especially for creating in the moment, for the moment, spontaneously reacting like that. That's like to me, that's like, it's my personal work. I think it was part of my question also earlier, is that you really always seem to do the right thing in any situation when you play. And so there's a deep level of trust there, or there must be in something.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I wonder if it's almost like in a sweet, goofy way to bring up the possibility that of music as a character, music as a presence, and then having a very trusting relationship there. Like that's a character in my life or a person in my life that I trust deeply. And maybe it relates to all the things we were saying about consistency and other things and love, that I've had the same profound moments over and over again. So I know that character is there and I can trust it, yeah.
I so wanted to witness the creative process that you all were in, because, when I first heard this, the idea, the concept of trust was so present in my field. I was like, my God, this is so intimate. And Shahzad, the sonic landscape you painted was so delicate and minimal, yet such a strong anchor. It's hard to do if you don't trust your ability to bring in, digest, and restate something.
Yeah. And I'm sure it was also very easy to trust that Hala was going to be putting out some truth in her poem.
Oh, definitely, for sure. Yeah, big time. It was so fun because it was the first take, and both of us were just felt that it went well, and felt. I think I could say for Hala, felt afterwards like that's it, we're good. Like there's no need to do a second take kind of thing. Yeah.
So you didn't do a second take?
No.
Trust.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I tend to want to do second takes usually.
Me too, always. I've had that experience, not to interrupt, but I had this experience. I remember doing this, where the first take was it, but we got to just do a second one.
Right. But somehow this time it was just like, no, it was just like, it's done. And I was like, I don't even think I need to listen to it. And I never feel that, but I just felt it was done. It was transmitted. We got it, And Shahzad, when we got into the studio, we sat down in the control room and Shahzad pulled out what was that keyboard?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was a Juno 60. It's one of the Junos, either a Juno 106 or a Juno 60. Yeah.
And he found the sound and I was like, great. And then we just did it. That night, we did have to listen to it just to add a little tiny bit of reverb and fade it out at the end of Shahzad sent it directly to you, John. And then he also sent it to somebody that I love very much, Laurie Anderson, that night. And that was such a treat, to know that she was going to listen to it, because I love her. And you know what? She's an incredible reciter of poetry and mixer of poem and song, so it was like the perfect person to send it to, kind of like someone I admire so deeply, And then I saw her randomly. Well, no, that's not true. It was partly random. I went to see her speak at the Rubin Museum, and then I brought her a book. I brought her a copy of the translations, and then I thought I would give it to her. But, she was busy and went around here and there. And I thought, another time. And then I was checking out a piece in the museum after the talk, and she was standing right there. And I said, Laurie, and I talked to her, and then we talked about Latif, and I gave her a book. But anyway, the point is like, that was a nice moment. So the trust. Also the trust of like walking away and being like, I don't need to run after her to give it to her now. That was a moment of trust too. It's like, if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. And I want to say one other thing about trust, and also about the opposite of it. I think militarism is a huge part of many nations now. And in order to justify this, lots of narratives, doom-ridden narratives have to be created. And unfortunately, they become self-fulfilling prophecies. You know, people that might not actually be our enemies, if we imagine that they're our enemies and we treat them like our enemies, then hey, they're going to become our enemies. So this kind of doom-ridden thinking, becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy, the treatment of rivers, you know, they are abundant sources of food, of wellness, of leisure, of all kinds of wonderful things, you know, and it's like, no, we're living in scarcity and we need to dump in the river because we don't have enough money to dump responsibly. So we're going to dump in the river, and then we're creating scarcity. Trusting that this earth is a incredibly giving, resilient place. We are living in a most extraordinary planet. And even if someone doesn't believe in a larger force, one can believe in the ground and believe this ground, if I put seeds in it, is likely going to give me food. And there's a generosity in this earth that we have emerged from. It's part of our nature. I think there's a lot of things to trust. And it's when we mess with it and we come from a place of scarcity and lack of trust is when things get messed up.
Your evocation of the great Earth Mother and her rivers, her waters, is a great segue into something that struck me so powerfully in your words, and that is consider the tree.
Yeah, the tree.
The reminder that the growing edge of all
Yes.
is by necessity, at least on this planet, from what we understand, has a necessary tenderness about it. And how tragically few people understand and hold that truism and let it inform their behavior. You know, whether it's teaching children or praying or tending your garden, that teaching is so important. If every person on the planet honored the truth that that which is restorative, that which brings life for tomorrow, that which actually creates the structure of the trunk, that which is resilient and long lasting, is in its essence tender and must be protected, must be, wow, huge.
In our relationships with each other, when we're able to go to that edge of ourselves where we're a little scared or we're a little raw, a little tender, but then to be there together and to interface, to communicate there, that's how relationships grow and love deepens. And, you know, in these conflict spots in the world, the Holy Land is very unholy right now. And the only thing that's going to make it holy, well, I mean, there has to be a ceasefire, and of course, and there has to be an incredibly huge, colossal effort of trauma relief. And I mean, I don't even understand how that's even going to happen, but, you know, that is the vision, you know, that we are able to come forward in a state of absolute reverence and just willingness to build bridges and recognize that people are wounded all over the place. Now there's this population, I mean, amputees and starving people. It's just such a horrendous situation that's happening there. It is a holy land when it's a laboratory for the most radical form of conflict resolution and healing and latif interaction. And we're so far from that. There's no way forward, really. There are so many guns on this planet and so much weaponry. There is no way forward unless we are able to get into these spaces together of like tenderness and rawness, and to hold even space for a person who wants to blow up a school and be like, listen, brother, how are you doing? What's happening here? What's going on with you? You know what I mean? Whoa, it's a lot. It's a lot. But, you know, if we actually, there's a lot of people who are capable of it. See, that's the thing, though. There are a lot of people in this world who are incredibly tender, warm, giving, and hopeful, and actually have tremendous ability to mediate difficult conflict resolution and to be there for people. And this is people are unemployed. Hey, this is a job that we need many people for. As AI takes over and a lot of the tasks that people were doing can be done via AI, there are going to be a lot more unemployed people. I mean, that's a fact. What kind of services do we really need? We need trauma relief. And retrofitting buildings and putting, solar panels on top of buildings, making gardens on top of buildings. There's lots of things we need to do, but this being one of them, of showing up for the Latif conversations and those scary places where we might actually have a blooming, we might actually have a movement,
Well, I'm curious along those lines. I mean, some people say, a lot of our elders say, is that nothing in the recent past, nothing in the landscape of the actual patterns of behavior and belief have changed. What has changed is that everything is now out in the open for us to look at and evaluate. So one argument is that the conflicts in the Middle East, the conflicts in Russia, the geopolitical tensions are no different than they were 20 years ago. What's different now is that everything is right in front of us. And
yes,
we are tasked with the opportunity to deal with it. And how are we going to deal with it? Do you all believe that that's the case?
Yes, 100%, 100%. I mean, even 800 years ago, when I'll bring up Rumi again, because I always do, but during his lifetime, what was happening? The Mongols were marching across Central Asia and plundering villages and putting skulls of human beings in pyramids and, burning through everything they could possibly burn through. So this violence has existed forever. A megalomaniacal character rolls through history, keeps rolling through history with different names and different faces, that megalomaniacal energy. And then there is, the sort of untreated madness of the human psyche that also rolls through history, where people want to get behind the megalomaniac and they want to get engaged in the destruction. I mean, that is a thing we have to deal with. And yes, now it is on full display, and people are still getting behind one side or the other, and not seeing this is a continuous plague. And unfortunately, that megalomaniacal energy and that hatred, it exists in every ethnicity, in every religion, under every flag. And we can stop the BS about this nation is perfect and this nation is criminal and these people are terrorists and these people are saints. What a bunch of BS. I mean, is war not institutionalized terrorism? How is it not? How is it not? This isn't even war. I mean, there was a time where wars were soldiers fighting each other on a battlefield. That would be war. But bombing civilians, which is a common thing, and America did it in Iraq. And the same feelings I have about Gaza, I had about Iraq. I had about Afghanistan. I was on my knees crying in the library at school in the invasions of Iraq, and I thought about it a lot, so this idea also of sadly equating people's sadness about Gaza with anti-Semitism is wrong. It's patronizing to say that. That's not anti-Semitism, to be concerned about a population of people that's being killed. I was that concerned about Afghanis and that concerned about Iraqis too, and the Ukrainians. And, I wasn't alive during Vietnamese, but look at that war. I mean, the idea that this hasn't existed through time, and is that we are not all perpetrators. All our countries, all our religions are not perpetrators is a joke. And we have to get over it and actually deal with the mental illness that it is expressive of, that is something that plagues humanity. And if we can deal with that and we can hold it and be kind around it and recognize that, listen, this megalomaniacal personality is not fit to hold the reins on a whole nation. So we don't enable that anymore.
So Shahzad, with everything that we've talked about so far, how do we restore the enterprise of music to being a more vital and enabled force in creating messages like your joint Latif work did? What's the state of affairs, and how can we be a more potent agent as a community of musicians and sonic creators?
I wish I could answer that in any kind of grand way. I, like many people, am ensconced in my own life and its affairs. I wake up in the morning, there's my mom, there's the kid, there's a series of other things, there's the laundry, etc. And I don't, and even as a musician, I am very, very lucky to work with so many people on so many things, but that still doesn't give me any kind of overarching sense of what are we amongst as a culture and as a community, whether it's New York or whether it's even wider the global community. So my understanding of music is still a very day-to-day affair of what am I doing that day, with whom, at what time. And so in terms of that question, I'm preoccupied with how to be effective, probably with one or two people that day. But if I zoom out a little bit and think about a few aspects of it, I don't know if I ever really agreed with this moment that John Lennon and Yoko Ono had, that music should have the right messages in it. I think I was always skeptical of that and felt like it was maybe a sweet and goofy moment in their lives of therapeutic reasoning, like scream therapy for a moment or other kinds of things. Because I feel like somehow it feels intuitively to me that the answer is not make the right music with the right messages that will then get out to the world and change it. Somehow that doesn't sit right with me. And maybe it's because it feels forced. It feels like, okay, I'm going to mechanically sit down and write the words that are the world. But then at the same time, we do keep getting beautiful stories of how powerful visualization is and what it is to sit and close your eyes and imagine something is a certain way. And then the whole rest of the day and the days to come, you act from that. And then you pull towards you the resonances of that imagined state, and it becomes real. So it's complicated. I feel like I want to leave music alone in a way and let it be whatever it wants to be in a moment, whether it's angry, whether it's positive, whether it's negative. And I think what I want to do instead is visualize as a human for my personal life, what outcomes do I want for myself and for the world, and then act from them all day intuitively. So it may not be music that day. It may be how I talk to the checkout person at the food co-op. And it might be music. It might be by the time I am playing a show, I might consider playing the bass a certain way from that same internally positive place. But I think for me, that's the starting point, is how can I change my internal visualizations to be kinder and more effective in moving the world to a better spot? And then things will happen throughout that day, sometimes music, sometimes non-music.
What I hear you saying is it's really at the core about showing up in a really authentic, Latif kind of way. And then that's when you trust that if you do that, it's going to inform the field. And when you're engaging in creation of music or whatever, the music is going to carry that signal in there. And it kind of loops back to trust, and it kind of loops back to why I was, personally was so floored by hearing this piece in the first place, is that the piece has all the great ingredients of a work of art. It's got a clear beginning, middle, and end. It's sonically compelling. And there's something else. It carries a signal, and that signal that it's carrying is the two of you.
That's beautiful. There's so many beautiful things that you just said. Like when you said in a Latif kind of way, it made me just think about people with Coca-Cola t-shirts. And why not have a t-shirt that just says Latif? Because if you're wearing a Coca-Cola t-shirt, what you're literally saying is go drink a Coca-Cola. So then why not wear a Latif t-shirt that says go be kind? It's so sweet. It's so simple. And then the other thing that you said about carrying, it's such a pure and beautiful image that when an object comes towards you, like a piece of art, it is a carrier. It's like it's carrying a signal. It's carrying a signal of the meaning of the artwork or the feelings of the creators at the time that they made it. It is a carrier. It's like a wire. It's like a communication device. It's so beautiful.
Go
I
ahead.
think that's what makes this piece so special too. And maybe this is my own bias when it comes to art and music, but the fact that, this was a live, real moment that didn't need to be redone.
Yes.
It didn't need to be cut up and moved around to become that which you thought you imagined it to be. That amplifies the signal.
Mm.
And it means it's courageous, which I love. Latif and courage seem to be two sides of the same coin.
One must be courageous in order to access that place. It's true. If we can't move forward with courage, because the point is yes, there's always the risk of being hurt. That tender place might be hurt, but the idea is that, well, I walk with some courage. And as you said, let me put this energy, as you said, into the field. Right? So I'm going to go forward with this courage and this tenderness, knowing, like he says, this seam might hold, this seam might split. I give my heart anyway. This idea of love anyway, be tender anyway, is courageous. It's courageous because everything that causes us to put armor up is fear. And again, sometimes that fear is creating a doom-ridden narrative that's just speculation. It's not necessarily true. It's not necessarily the thing that's going to happen. But if we go forward with that being the leading narrative, and we go forward with the armor that narrative demands of us, then hey, it'll be a self-fulfilling prophecy, But if we continue to go forward with this courage of like, I can be tender, I'm going to try it, and yes, I might get hurt or something might go a little wonky, but I'm going to be strong too. Because again, it requires strength too. And that's a funny thing that most delicate place is actually the expression of an utter and complete strength. Because you wouldn't be doing it. You wouldn't be there like that in that tenderness if you didn't have strength and trust. It's a really interesting state of mind, state of being, and it's very, very healing. And as you said, the leading edge. And so us as a collective humanity, that's our leading edge to go. If we're going to evolve, we're not going to do it with armor on. That's not the leading edge of growth. We're going to do it with tenderness leading. And that's a radical thing to think about, and not with the X versus Y, not with the homogenization of this side or that side in any way. Everything on this earth is a mixed bag. All the peoples, every individual, I'm a mixed bag. We're all mixed bags. Everything's a mixed bag. Every situation is a mixed bag. So we have to also recognize that and the big question mark. And yet still we go tender.
Absolutely. Your analogy of the tree, I think, is a universal teaching. I think about the rootlet reaching for the center, reaching for the water, reaching for nutriment. And it all happens. These leading edges are so often in the darkness.
Yes.
Not knowing what's around as you push that extra inch. Is it danger? Is it a rock? Is it annihilation? Is it perfect nutriment? You don't know.
From another poem I'm working on, he says, why did the love-crazed lover, trick his mind 1,000 times? I can't remember, but that annihilation, that idea of being even open to the annihilation, right? That's an incredible, when he says, I linked arms with death and leapt into emptiness. The two things we fear, death and emptiness. And he says, I linked arms with death and leapt into the emptiness. My mind second guessed me, chased me down, tried to scare me out of surrender. But why should I be afraid? I give form to formless fear. I write its every rant. I write every rant. Now, of course, not to say there are scary things in the world and people behave in horrific ways. And yet I have a power over my own perception and my own way of being. And as you said, I trust if I lead that way, it's going to do something good for the field.
And you mentioned S word, which is could be a whole nother episode, and that is the essence of surrender and how little we know in growth capitalist industrial society about surrender.
Oh
And
my God.
surrender is a thin veneer on top of this medicine Latif. I mean, Latif is the unpacking of surrender. I love it.
It is. Embrace the question mark, as he says, put mystery in the middle. The mystery is every day, that question mark, right? Every interaction. Bobby McFerrin, speaking of improvisation, Bobby McFerrin said, people get afraid to improvise. But he's like, everything's improvisation. You didn't plan this conversation. That was improvisation, right? You walk down the street, you say hello to someone, you're improvising.
So beautiful. Is there anything that we need to explore before we close this?
Well, I guess I want to say just really a huge thank you to both of you, Jeff and John, because Hala and I wouldn't have had that experience that evening if it wasn't for this podcast adventure that you're both embarking upon. And it was really significant for both of us.
Yeah, it's true.
Significant for our relationship as artists together in terms of moving that forward. It was significant for me because as Hala was saying all of those things, I was moved by them in the moment they were happening. So as I was a simultaneous like listener, audience person, and performer, and I was really moved by the experience of it. So, and I'm really proud of it. So I thank you both so much for causing that to happen.
Yeah.
So very welcome.
Thanks for stepping up and doing it. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
And beyond what I imagined it would be.
I want to also echo that because, I really thought that you wanted me to come on and do translation. And I saw the text thread later. It was maybe 2 days before we were supposed to give it to you or something like that. And I was like, oh, wait, he wants me to do something on my own. And then I was like, oh, man, I got to get this together. And I talked to Shahzad on the phone, and Shahzad was like, stay up all night and finish it. He was very encouraging of me to get it done. And it was so nice because, people say a lot of the best art comes out of community and comes out of conversation, so in a way it was like the ask, couldn't you do this? And then the friend who I get to talk to about what I'm thinking about doing, and then him encouraging me to just do it. And the need for it, because a lot of times these things will just swim in my head, but the request was very helpful, and I appreciate it a lot. And this was such a wonderful conversation too. So thank you.
Shahzad, how can we find out more about your work and your creative output? Give us some links and some destinations.
Well, you can't. That's the great thing.
That's so underground.
Yeah, I'm down there because, for example, my Instagram, I'm just getting excited about. My plan is to get as many followers as possible with no posts. So that's kind of my style. So no one really, there's nothing really to tell you except that
you could tell what the handle is.
My Instagram handle is at Ectoderm88, which is ECTODERM and then 88, both numbers. And it's nice because ectoderm is the outer layer of our skin, and then by happenstance, it feels great as a virtual social media handle because that is the exterior layer. But yeah, just follow me on Instagram. Then once in a while, I might just say one thing about what I'm doing once in a while, then you might catch it.
We're going to certainly plug the John Cage approach to social media, and you as the
Thank
original.
you.
The John Cage algorithm. I think that's going to be the new thing.
That's so good. Yes. I'm 433 my Instagram. That's really good.
How about you, Holly?
Yeah, well, pretty much Hala Liza is my full name's Hala Liza Ghafouri, but my website is halaliza.com. And my Instagram is at Halaliza. I've also just recently been starting to post YouTube videos of certain performances, and I'm in the midst of putting more up. So I'm trying to actually put more stuff online, because I also, like Shahzad, kind of, move around and sort of, kind of very life oriented, real time experience, and sometimes have a little resistance about online. But anyway, I'm doing that more. So yes, you can find me. You can find me at Halaliza and halaliza.com.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this and the whole thing. Like, really.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
Really
also,
appreciate
as we
both of
said,
you.
really, yeah, it was a great ask. Thank you. Yeah.
Many blessings. Great to sit with you all. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
same.
That was a good talk.
The Saint Disruption Podcast, recorded and mixed by Hamilton Media Design at Sidehouse Records. You can also find more creative collaborations on all our major streaming platforms. Visit our YouTube channel for more creative content and video episodes of our podcast.
Osiris.